Good morning, everyone. If you didn't watch this song yesterday, go watch it now. It's great. It's really, really catchy. One of those memes that is a song, and I think this guy's, 490,000 views. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. He's pretty happy about that. And it's worthwhile song, but it illustrates how far from over this is. And we'll talk about the American election at the end of the show, but first, we'll focus on Canadian politics because we've got some Canadian news happening. Ooh, interesting, right? Here's Holly Doan, and she says, "We're the darkest color they had in the paint box." And here is the net borrowing as share of GDP in select countries. And Canada's one of those select countries, and we're like, they're black. Pushed really hard with the marker, right? So yeah, we didn't do so hot with the spending, and we're still spending, and spend. Yesterday as well, 23 hours ago, full of confidence that they were going to hold those Liberals accountable and get those wee documents, Michael Barrett tweeted, "Time for the Liberals to finally end the cover-up. Ethics Committee is back to continue fighting for answers." And then, well, here we go.
At the start of the meeting, we heard something new, and that's that Speaker Spotlight has destroyed all of the records of speaking engagements for the individuals named in the motion, the Prime Minister and his spouse.
Yowza, right? So are we going to get the wee documents? What wee documents? Nothing to have a conversation about now, Ethics Committee, right? So there's no documents to have. So yeah, what else do you want to talk about? Moving on, right? Sorry about your luck. Aw, shucks. Aw, shucks. Although Mr. Barrett goes on to say that these documents were legally compelled during the last parliament and blah, 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 blah. So realistically, you'd think that there'd be a record of these documents somewhere unredacted because they went into the Liberal legal department for redaction, pre-redaction before being released, right? They didn't want anybody to get any information that they didn't want to have out because Liberals just don't answer questions they don't like, right? That's kind of just how they've run this government. They don't answer questions they don't like. Sorry, Mr. Barrett. Oh, there's a record that you want to see? Sorry, that's a question we don't like to answer, and we'll just make sure that record disappears and wah wah. Sorry about your luck. It is worth listening to the whole 2 minutes and 47 seconds, but you should just click on the link in the description and go watch it. It's very interesting. He weaves a story. He talks about how these documents really should have come out. And does it matter? Not does it matter. Of course it matters. I'm going to talk at the end of the show, and hopefully I remembered it because I'm teasing it. But when I say does it matter, after the Canadian election, people were like, "Oh, we've got to bring the government down, blah, blah, blah." And I said, there's not the will for another election, right? There's not the will for that. I think the way the American election is happening, because it's not over yet, is a situation where the will of the people is this isn't over, right? And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm taking the pulse of this wrong. Tim Pool thinks I'm wrong. He says, yeah, maybe, it's in the realm of possible, but not going to happen. And he said, and I think his conclusion is the world's just not that interesting. It'll probably be just Joe Biden and moving on. It'll probably be that we never get the answers that we should get. We're just, sorry, man, we just don't get it. Just not allowed, right? But here's the Spencer Fernando. He says legally ordered wee documents were destroyed. Yeah. Dan Fraser asks, at what point does Canada decide to draw the line in the sand and have a real investigation and charges laid into the endless scandals and general illegal behavior of this Prime Minister and his Liberal government? Are we going to allow this to become a banana republic? Okay, two things about that. One, too late. Too late, we're already there, right? The wee documents are destroyed and there's no one ringing that bell. And two, good luck convincing people that, okay, first you're talking about, are we going to have a police investigation? The answer to that is no. The answer to that is no. And are we going to allow this, or are we going to investigate the general illegal behavior of this Prime Minister and his Liberal government? Again, the answer is no. They've gone through elections after governing the way they had, with the spending the way it was, with the stated goal of increasing immigration. They did, even in this pandemic. So what are you going to get them on, right? Basically an election is saying that you've got the consent of the governed, right? The people agree with us. So be quiet, right? Get in line, right? Just like the the Democrats are telling everybody in the United States right now, we won and you lost, and we know it was close and all, but you lost fair and square, so get in line. That's what they're saying, right? Despite the fact that there are still states in serious question. And Trump may lose, but he hasn't lost yet. But he may lose. I don't think he lost, but he may lose. Okay. Just want to put that out there. Like, it's possible. Anyway, the We documents are destroyed. So what else are we going to talk about? And the funny thing is, here's Theo Fleury, and he says, if someone doesn't go to jail for destroying We documents, then democracy and the rule of law is dead. Yes. Hey, liberals, quit embarrassing yourselves and our great country. Yes, we know you broke the law. Now stand up and pay for your crime. And he follows up and he says, this isn't politics. This is criminal. I agree with you 100%. And Fleury follows up and says, destroying documents is an admission of guilt. I would agree with him. But again, in the absence of documents and the absence of a police investigation compelling the documents or investigating we shut down. They rolled up their Canadian operations. All of those documents are destroyed in the shutting down of we. Oh, we destroyed those things because we shut down the company. Sorry about that. All of the holdings revert back to their former owners, which is, my parents, right? Shucks, says the we owners, right? Gosh darn it. Now it's a private company and you've got no right to ask those questions. See you later, sir. And unless you're the RCMP, right? That's basically what's going to happen. That's happening, right? So is somebody going to go to jail? Not like in 2011 for Dalton McGuinty, right? Former top Ontario Liberal aide sentenced to 4 months in jail for role in the gas plant scandal. This is April 11th, 2018. It was a 2011 scandal. Do you think anybody's going to go to jail for this? Do you think anybody's going to go to jail for erasing those records? Do you think that anybody's going to, the political theater the rhetoric is going to be ratcheted right up. Do you think it drops the government? If it drops the government, do you think the Liberals get hurt by this in the polls? Third, we just watched a very crooked election and they're going through massive recounts in a whole bunch of states that use voting machines. I don't remember. Honestly, I don't remember. And I've started looking, but I can't remember. If you've got a link for what kind of vote counting was used, if it was the Dominion machines. Dominion. Who names a vote counting company Dominion? Hello. Somebody made the correlation of Deep Space Nine, like the Dominion, they're shapeshifters and they're overwhelmingly powerful and conniving and blah, 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 all this stuff. I was like, yeah, but they don't come from the gamma quadrant. Okay, but I don't think that anybody's going to jail for this. It's too, they've wiped the drives with a cloth, right? They hit the laptops with a hammer. It's done. That's it, right? That's what bleaching it means, right? David Livingston, McGuinty's chief of staff from 2012 to 2013, was also sentenced to 12 months probation and ordered to complete 100 hours of community service. Livingston was found guilty of 1 count of unauthorized use of a computer and 1 count of attempting to commit mischief to data in January. The latter charge, however, was stayed in February. Livingston's deputy at the time, Laura Miller, was found not guilty of the same charges. The Crown argued for a 6-month jail term for Livingston, while his defense had called for a conditional discharge. That would have meant Livingston would have had no criminal record if he fulfilled the imposed conditions. Livingston, 65, was part of a plot to delete potentially embarrassing records related to the government's decision to cancel the gas plant ahead of a 2011 Ontario election. Justice Timothy Lipson said the sentencing that he agrees with the Crown's condition that Livingston attempted to interfere in the democratic process and that incarceration is necessary given the nature of his offense. His conduct was an affront to and an attack upon democratic institutions and values, Lipson said. An attempt to tamper with the democratic process requires a strong denunciatory response. The document destruction occurred against express warnings from alarmed senior bureaucrats and amid deception by Livingston as to his real intention, Lipson noted. Livingston had been defiant when warned about the perils of destroying documents, calling it political bullshit. The judge said the accused who wielded significant power and influence also was deceitful in gaining access to the computers. The offense is very serious because it involves an attempt by the defendant to thwart the core values of a parliamentary democracy, Lipson said. The defendant's conduct was egregious and his degree of responsibility high. It didn't change the result of the election. Right? There wasn't a by-election. There wasn't any follow-up to this. The Liberals carried on and skirted through. And is that just politics, or is there more to that now that we know? And the dirty tricks don't begin and end with the the system, the counting system, the Dominion counting system. It's much more than that, and part of it is the media. Part of it, and if you've been watching the American election, and not just the media about the American election, but actually watching the American election, you can see the difference in the reporting versus what's going on. I mean, you can see the slant in ours. I hope you can see the slant in ours, right? But again, way back in 2011, when they weren't using these systems, they were still able to tamper with democracy at a high level with people who had a lot of power, right? And what did they say? So he wielded significant power and influence. So in absence of a voting machine, in absence of the ability to tip the scales with a voting machine, they use human assets, right? This guy is somebody who I can't imagine acted alone, right? To destroy this documentation, to influence the election in this underhanded way. But he was a well-placed, respected person who was in a position of power and influence, right? And he pulled this. I mean, wild, right? And spent jail time, but no longer. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're there. I don't think that anybody's gonna for destroying the documents, slap on the wrist, and it's not gonna have any impact. It won't bring down the government. It's not nothing to talk about now, right? Like the Liberals have calculated that the NDP are not going to drop this government. And if the NDP threaten it, they've got the block still, right? They haven't burned any bridges there. They've still got two really bad scandals, one with the block, one with the NDP before this government falls, in my opinion. Here's Pierre Poilievre. He says, after 83 days as finance minister, Freeland offers no deficit or spending forecast, no budget or fiscal anchor, no more bi-weekly COVID spending reports, no transparency on $80 billion in costs, says PBO, no rent relief as she misdrafted the law and needs a do-over. No, more no, replaced more no. I don't know about that last line. It's kind of, I don't know, wordplay's funny. What are we going to do with our finance minister who has no experience and whose experience is, I'm friends with George Soros? Right? Really? Like, what are we going to do with that? We're just going to sit there and take the mismanagement and just, I guess that's it. Double down and just wait for, like, after watching the U.S. election and really taking in how crooked these elections can be. And I've said before, you don't steal an election everywhere, right? Like the vast majority of the election is done straight up by straight up people who mean well and want to get an election done earnestly and honestly and to uphold democracy because they feel like they're part of the system. I've talked to a lot of these people and a lot of people in that system, right? And they want to do good. But if you're in a couple of key places, and I mean, just the policies, I mean, just watching Faith Goldie not be allowed to run ads just because the Toronto Star, or excuse me, Bell Media didn't want to have their reputation sullied. Sorry, you don't get protection of your reputation over top of election laws. Like, it just doesn't work like that. But to see that happen, to see what happened to Mr. Bernier, to see what happened with the Antifa people and the silencing and inability of anybody else to coalesce a group, right? Unless you're NDP, Liberal, or Green, you're being protested as alt-right, Nazi, whatever it is, whatever sticks, right? Doesn't matter what the truth is. That's what you're being protested with. All of that is still election interference. And people say, oh, that's politics. I don't think that's politics. That's politics on another level in a country like Nazi Germany, like USSR. And not exactly, but it's tilting in that direction in a really, really concerning way and very quickly. Very, very quickly. It didn't used to be like this. You could disagree in mixed company and say, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't a huge deal. And you know what? Maybe it was more of a huge deal than I remember because I was a kid and people weren't talking about serious things with me. But it seemed to me that people could have serious conversations and not have entire friendship circles disintegrate in the same way as is happening now. I could be wrong. Moving on to the next story, Liberal MP out of caucus after employing her sister for years using public funds, which is against the rules. A Toronto MP is leaving the Liberal caucus after CBC News found she had employed her sister in her constituency office for years using public funds, a violation of parliamentary rules. Yasmin Ratansi, sorry if I got that wrong, I've definitely got that wrong, announced her departure late Monday on Facebook. Quote, I made an error in judgment by employing my sister in my constituency office, and I've remedied the situation, but it does not excuse the error I made, she wrote. Several former staffers told CBC News Ratansi tried to cover up the relationship by having her sister use a fake name and telling some staff to keep her family connection quiet. Quote, I think it's horrific that a member of parliament that's entrusted to behave honorably and honorable and ethically can get away with this with impunity, said a former employee. It really questions the integrity of these institutions. Scrolling down, blatant disregard. Multiple sources said Ratansi employed her sister from at least 2005 to 2011, then hired her again in 2017. But that time, said the source, Ratansi and Katri, sorry if I got that wrong, told staff to call her Jenny rather than Zinat, a name she hadn't used in the office before. CBC News had seen one card bearing the name Jenny Kariti. Sorry if I've got that wrong. So she's employing her sister, and that's against the rules. But again, other than leaving caucus, we don't have too many consequences. The Liberals picked up 2 seats in those 2 by-elections. Wonder how, right? Dominion. And then after those by-elections, so they're not really down. They're down 2, and then after the by-elections, they're back at what they were. I think it was 158 or 159. So, and with 2 independents and Jody Wilson-Raybould, who vote with them generally, right? They vote what the Liberals vote for the most part, even though they don't have to. Presuming as a way to get back into caucus if they were to run again. Anyway, here's somebody who worked with Miss Ratansi, excuse me. She says, having served with Yasmin Ratansi as an MP, I wasn't surprised by the news of her lapse of judgment by hiring her sister despite the rule prohibiting this practice. Her sister was given an alias to skirt the rules. It looks more like a fraud perpetrated against taxpayers to me. And this is a former MP for Scarborough Southwest. And so that's interesting, isn't it? Very interesting. Do you want a lockdown moving into COVID? Do you want a lockdown? Are you on board for lockdowns? This is manufactured consent. I'm not on board for lockdowns. I think and this is a curfew, excuse me, curfews. Are you on board for curfews? I'm not on board for curfews or lockdowns, and we're going to talk about both. But this is manufacturing consent for curfew, right? 67% of Canadians say they would back a temporary nighttime curfew, 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. So the interesting thing about this is why would that help? How in the world would that help at all? I don't understand. Does the virus know it's 10 p.m. and so time to come and party? Like, who's even out at that point in time anyway? What is the purpose of this curfew? Doug Ford made an announcement yesterday. Ford says Toronto will move into red zone this weekend as cases surge. Here's what I think happened. A couple of weeks ago, the businesses said, you need to prove that we're at fault for doing this. Give us the data, and they couldn't provide the data. So they relented and said, oh, you're right, open up. So they threw out their framework, and they brought in the new framework with the, if there's 10 cases, then this, if there's 20 cases, then this, and blah, 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 and so on. It's a garbage framework, and the only thing that it does is remove the power of the businesses to question why they're being shut down, right? If there's this many cases, your business is shut down. That's just it. Sorry, this is what our framework says. The data, what data? This is what our framework says. For real, that's what I think this is about. Premier Doug Ford said that Toronto will move into the red control level this weekend as COVID-19 cases continue to surge in the city. On Monday, Ford said that Toronto, which is currently in a modified stage 2, will move into the red control level, which will see the reopening of some businesses like indoor dining and gyms, but with tighter restrictions. So it's like a bait and switch, right? And when you can't really meaningfully fight, right? Unless you get your business associations to say, no, we're all done listening to you and we're all done. And that's what I think mayors should be doing. That's what I think leaders should be doing. They're basing it on cases. And what's that, Dr. Yaffe?
In fact, if you're testing in a population,
what happens when you start testing the general public in 25, 35, and 45,000 groups? Is that low COVID populations? Sorry if it's too quiet. I think it's too quiet, but I'm going to play it anyway. She's saying that 50% false positives.
that doesn't have very much COVID, you'll get false positives almost half the time. That is, the person actually doesn't have COVID, they have something else, they may have nothing.
They may have nothing. Flip a coin. Go for your COVID test, and just before you leave, flip a coin. Heads, I've got COVID. Right? It's about the same. Right? I've lost the plot on lockdown, says Laurie. Then again, so have the people in charge. November 9, strict new COVID measures coming for Toronto. October 30th, Ontario Premier pushing to reopen business, ease restrictions in COVID-19 hotspots. The whole thing is just ridiculous. Here's a Canadian person, Urian Amph, Sorry if I've got that wrong, Urian. He says, the dead of November so far. So I guess I have to ask, if masks and or social distancing works, then why didn't these people use that to keep themselves safe? Why are all those 80-plus-year-olds out partying without masks on? And why is any of this my fault? Why do I need to lock down? And here's the dead of, so he's saying the dead of November so far. This is in Alberta, but Edmonton zone male 80 plus, Calgary zone female 80 plus, Calgary zone 80 plus male, right? The point here is, well, we're going to get to the point, but the people who are dying, at the point I was making yesterday, I was talking about what do they die of? What do they die of? I actually have an answer for that question today, which is great. But I'm going to talk about Peel region still first, and then we'll get into that. Here's the mayor of Peel. And it says, reality check, Peel's COVID crisis. I fully support the added measures we're taking in Peel to mitigate the rapid and dangerous spread of COVID-19 in Peel. They're doing restrictions that are higher than the provincial standard. I don't think that they should be able to do that personally, but apparently, like, there's so many issues with the response to this on every level, and there's so many issues generally, like from the Upper Grand District School Board, from Guelph mismanagement issues, people willing to create bike lanes but not willing to fix potholes. Like, seriously, we should be prioritizing how the majority of people live and travel in the city. We shouldn't be prioritizing green and active transportation just because those are buzzwords and because the UN likes them. We should be fixing the things that are actually problematic for a lot of the people in the city. That's the point I'm trying to make. But there's so many problems across everywhere. Even addressing one, it's like gridlock because the people don't want to address these things. They want you to believe and go along with it. And at the end of this letter here, he is making a naked affront just to say, like, for those of you who have questions or who are questioning this, take this seriously, offering no backup to his statements. Right? Here it is anyway. I fully support the added measures we're taking in Peel region to mitigate the rapid and dangerous spread of COVID-19 in Peel. I know I read that already. I support it because lives are at stake. Lives are always at stake. It's dangerous to leave your house, man. No amount of negative, hateful, and offensive social media or phone messages will change that. Sometimes the right thing to do isn't the easiest or the most popular. No, the right thing to do right now is stand up and say we're done with these mask mandates and we're going back to normal. But you're not doing that. Back to this. I have been in daily personal contact with many business owners, and for the most part, they understand this is a crisis. Some have chosen to stay closed and apply for the relief funding, while others have again adapted. These are tremendously challenging times for them. Here are facts. He lists some facts. One is that Caledon's COVID positivity rate is higher than Mississauga's. Cases don't matter. Cases just don't matter. They just don't matter. I'm sorry. They just 50% false positives render the case useless. The positive cases are useless. There are a lot of people who are getting tested multiple times in a week or whatever. They're getting tested daily or more if they have to go see their loved ones, or they have to prove that they were having a test. This was earlier in the pandemic. I had a friend who was visiting somebody in long-term care, and she would have to get a test every time that she went to visit their relative. And she was like, well, I wonder how many, like, do I count every day or is it just like once? I was like, you count every day, man. Anyway, back to this. Hospitals across the region are over capacity. That's been true for years and has never been a reason to close businesses ever. That's a poor excuse, Mr. Mayor. Back to this. It's time for a reality check. If we don't get this pandemic under control by adhering to the new measures, then we will be forced again into full lockdown. Ultimately, the outcome will be a reflection of our actions and decisions. No, because the reality check here is the pandemic is under control. People generally aren't dying from this at the rates they were in the first wave, and Sweden has had a much better response from their community without having the crushing debt, the business lockdowns, and all of the rest of the negative outcomes that we've had in Canada. And we have had quite a few negative outcomes. Back to this. Tomorrow at 6 p.m., Peel's medical officer of health will join me for a COVID-19 town hall. He and I will put to him town hall, and I will put to him all of the questions and comments I've received from Caledon residents and businesses. I want to acknowledge and thank many residents who are responsibly practicing the core 4 protocols and who I know will follow these control measures. For those who are questioning the measures, I urge you to take this seriously to protect yourselves, your families, friends, and communities. We will get through this. we will get through this, but not if you continue to goose step into these draconian lockdowns with threats of if we don't get this under control, all these positive tests results in these over capacity hospitals. The hospital's only over capacity because they made the capacity 85%. Most hospitals were operating at 110% or more throughout Ontario. Fix that. That has nothing to do with COVID. It's very frustrating. Richard Zussman says, update, these activities must be suspended immediately in Metro Vancouver. Spin classes, yoga, group fitness, dance classes, and any other group indoor activity that increases the respiratory rate. You have a power walking group? The answer is no. Okay. Weekend overdose deaths underline increased risks during the pandemic. So even overdoses are worse during the pandemic. 3 women and 2 men died in Ottawa in the weekend of overdose suspected of containing fentanyl. I'm not going to dig into going into the Ottawa specific numbers to find out how many people died of COVID this weekend. Just suffice it to say that in Guelph, the Wellington Dufferin Health Unit added 24 new cases, making, I think 38 is the total. I think that's right. Making 38 cases. Guelph has had 11 deaths forever, but these 24 new fatalities, I've been banging the drum of like our health unit hasn't had an increase in deaths since like July. And then yesterday I refreshed the page because I saw the Guelph Mercury reporting on 38 deaths in the health unit. And I was like, it's been 11 forever. How many people died yesterday? And then it was in Dufferin. But like in this situation, Ottawa, we've got 4 people who died over the weekend. And they're trying to make this about the pandemic. It's not about the pandemic. It has nothing to do with the pandemic. I'm pretty sure the pandemic's over, except for the media and the politicians who are pushing the further lockdowns. Pretty much. It's ridiculous. And I'm going to get to very shortly the treatment or what treatments they will give you or they should be giving you according to the SARS 2003 retrospective in this textbook somebody sent me. But here's somebody saying, I don't get what's so hard to understand about Ontario's new COVID system. All you have to do is Google Ontario COVID plan. Then you'll see the link labeled Reopening Ontario. Click that link and then scroll down and find Read the Framework. Look through the different levels to locate your health region. It will be classified as one of prevent, standard measures, green, protect, strengthened measures, yellow, restrict, intermediate measures, orange, control, stringent measures, red. It's easy to remember because strengthened is obviously stronger than standard, but not as strong as intermediate. If it helps, think of strengthened as the intermediate level between standard and intermediate. Are you confused yet? It's quite funny because he's trying to be, I'm not going to read through all 15, but you should read through them and just understand how ridiculous it is. He talks about how, now onto page 10. Where is page 10? It goes from 9 to 11. There doesn't seem to be a page 10 in the document. Okay, ignore that for now. Onto page labeled page 11, even though we really know it's page 10. Okay, on page 12, 11, we get to the public health measures for each of the new levels. See the big blocks labeled restrictions and guidelines? Ignore that because they're not current. So he goes through this painstakingly, and it's pretty funny, and I appreciate it. So you should have a read through. There's some that are more arduous, like there's some tweets that you just have to get to because they're set up for other tweets. But overall, it's a win. Blacklock's reporter is reporting MPs fed up after Patty Haydu cut short committee testimony, claims she's just too busy for probative questions. Don't ask me questions that I can't answer. These are questions I don't like, right? How does SARS kill you? Okay, first, I wanted to show you, hold on. Okay, first, several human coronaviruses cause mild upper respiratory tract illness, and around 10 to 30% of common colds are coronavirus related. Usually viruses are quite host specific, but sometimes they can infect other species. Down here it says the illness, SARS, but SARS-CoV-2 or whatever, SARS-CoV-2 is similar to SARS. So this is about SARS, okay? 2003. But this is analogous. Okay, the illness is a potentially severe form of pneumonia that begins in the same way as the flu. A fever of 100 degrees, 100.4 or higher, sometimes with chills, headache, body aches, and malaise. Within a week, patients develop a dry cough and difficulty breathing. About 10 to 20% require a ventilator. Some also get diarrhea. Most patients start to recover after 5 or 6 days. An effective treatment is not known, but usually the patient is given the same antibodies, antivirals, and steroids used to treat atypical pneumonia. So that's what I was questioning. I was like, what are the treatments even? What could they do? That's what they would do. Patients are isolated in especially ventilated rooms. Medical workers wear masks, gowns, gloves, goggles, and vigorously wash their hands with either soap and water or alcohol-based rubs. Children and adults of all ages and every health condition have been infected. As with most other respiratory infections, the very old and patients with pre-existing conditions tend to suffer the most. Okay, if we know all this already, doesn't it seem strange that we're just, in the lockdown and there's no recourse, there's no way to deal with this in a way that doesn't destroy our economy, that doesn't have our politicians finger wagging at us, right? Oh, no soup for you. No, that was Babu, wasn't it? Wasn't no soup for you. Okay, here's Justin Trudeau, the Pfizer announcement from yesterday. Isn't it interesting that everybody was very quiet on this vaccine thing, and then the American election happened and Biden is declared, and then the next day they come out with this vaccine? I still won't be taking any vaccine. Not a chance. But 680 News is reporting, we see the light at the end of the tunnel. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he's hopeful COVID-19 vaccines will begin rolling into Canada by early 2021. Still not happening. Still not happening. Okay, we're at the U.S. Not happening in that I'm not taking any vaccine. And in Canada, we have protections around that, and I talked about that yesterday. I'm sure that there are valid reasons in Canada that have long legal precedent that you're allowed to refuse a vaccine for pretty much any reason. Like, you're allowed to refuse any medical intervention you want to refuse, right? Like, it's your body. You have body agency. Do we not? Wear your mask, citizen. Don't question it, citizen. Right? Do what keeps us all safe, citizen, or you're deplorable. Awful. We live in these times, and we're not doing anything. We're not doing near enough to fight against it. And single voices, good luck, right? Good luck. Drew Holden says, listen, you racist, bigoted, self-righteous shitbags, it's time for you to put down your guns and Bibles, take off your clan hoods, and come unify with your intellectual and moral betters. The media right now. I'm stunned this approach isn't winning more hearts and minds. This is the Canadian media trying to inform the Canadian public on the US election. Everybody just grow up, accept that you lost, right? Accept it. And the people who are celebrating, I think they know it's an empty celebration. I think they know there's another shoe that's about to drop. I've heard people speculate that the pushing of Biden as the winner is meant to get people even more angry if Trump is like if the decision is flipped and Trump is declared the winner through the Supreme Court or whatever. This is done to stoke the fire, if you will. I don't know for sure, but that's what I've heard. Here's an interesting development. In response to Barr's memo, top DOJ officials overseeing voter fraud investigations quit. I heard on one thing that he's moved into a different position to prosecute, like he's moved from the head of it to working on the team to prosecute. I've also heard that he knows more about, like, he's involved and that's why he quit. Who knows? I don't know. I'm just showing you the news, man. I have no idea. Global News says Barr's action comes days after Democrat Joe Biden defeated Trump and raises the prospect that he will use the Justice Department to try to challenge the outcome. Well, I mean, I don't think that he is challenging the outcome, but the votes aren't certified yet, as far as I've heard. As far as, like, Pennsylvania is not certified, and Wisconsin, there's a bunch of them. CNN just took Arizona, I think, from Biden. Like an hour ago, half an hour ago, just as I was starting the show. So there's a lot going on here. Here's townhall.com, which is like a second tier media outlet in the States, but says they had this all planned. Maria had algorithms, had paper ballots waiting to be inserted when needed, and when Trump's vote in the blue states went up enormously, that's when they stopped the vote count and went in and replaced Trump votes with Biden votes. I showed yesterday the Trump count going down by 19,558 or something like that, and then Biden's total going up by the same amount. I've shown a bunch of, proof, Twitter proof, I suppose, not proof, but they have signed affidavits, which are actual evidence that you would submit in a court looking at this, of postal workers who witnessed firsthand election tampering and fraud. So, I mean, this is interesting. Here's what I was alluding to at the beginning. Newsmax, and this is a 10-minute video, but at the beginning of the video, he talks about how this isn't over and we're not going to be moved along by people saying, nobody wants to talk about the election anymore. The election's over and Biden won. Kind of like move on. He's saying, no. This isn't done yet, and this is like very legitimate, and this is news, and we're gonna stick on this. Newsmax apparently is like own One American News, in that they're another kind of competitor to Fox News and the other news channels. As far as their legitimacy, a lot of people have been talking about them. But the reason I brought this clip up is to talk about that will to revisit the results. After the Canadian election, there isn't really a mechanism to do that, and the mechanism is that there's no party or coalition of parties that can work together to form the government, right? If that happens, then the government falls, but it's not likely to happen after an election, right? It would have to be, especially in Canadian House of Commons. I couldn't think of a situation off the top of my head that would result in like a hung parliament like that. But that's fundamentally the only way we would get into a situation for this, right? And I don't know how we would clean up the election interference that is rampant in Canada, and I mean is rampant in the United States too. The misleading news, the silencing on Twitter, the silencing on Facebook, the inability for people to have robust conversations without being removed off YouTube, or having Twitter's fact checking, like live fact checking the president of the United States. This is a whole new world, and it's not great. It's not great. Like, this isn't. If you go against what the common wisdom is, then look out, right? And that's look at what's happened to Amazing Polly and all the people who were enthusiastic Trump supporters. Not Amazing Polly wasn't necessarily that, but she was in line with people who were silenced off YouTube in a big removal. So how do you fight that? How do you even begin to turn the tide on informing people of what's going on, right? And in Canada, good luck. I mean, the engagement for talking about Canadian politics, man, it's you and I, right? There's us, and I mean, there's some people on the Liberal side who are interested in it, but they're not interested in it from like the politic gaming, the watching the politics unfold and whatever. They're interested in it from how can we flip this to be acceptable as being ruled directly by the UN. And I mean, I think that we're there. I think that the immigration compact that was written by Canada at the behest of the UN to use as a framework to export to other countries, I think that we're there. I think that Trudeau is presiding over one of the first UN states, and I think that he thinks it's another kind of side of utopia. And I mean, just watch the whole beginning of my show to understand how wrong he is, right? Like, there are people who are upset. There are people who are breaking the rules blatantly and removing documents and whatever, and they're not going to be held accountable. And that's not great. Rule of law is dead in Canada. It's been dead for a while, and all that's left is to acknowledge it and either fix it or, get on board with the new system. Get on board with the new system, right? They're not going to fix it. Unfortunately. Anyway, that's enough out of me today. This recount and the recount and the audit and whatever happens there, Trump could still lose. I said at the beginning, he could still lose, but he could win. And if he wins, expect exactly what was happening before, right? Like, expect the Antifa people to reactivate, expect the riots, and expect the unrest. And it's not over. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. I'll be recording with Greg today, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.